What if the love of your life disappears just when you need them most, and the child you've been waiting for is at the center of a dangerous game? Armand thought he lost everything: his wife, his first child, his chance at happiness. But a shocking betrayal, a secret fiancé, and a twisted plot will push him to the edge. Will he save the woman and child he loves, or lose them forever? Stay with us, because this is a story of love, betrayal, and a miracle that will leave you breathless. Welcome back to Beyond Color Stories. Hello, my family. How are you all doing today? I've been reading your comments, and I see so many of you asking, where is James? Well, I have some exciting news. He's starting a brand new channel, and I've added the link below, so go check it out and enjoy his beautiful stories. I know he would really appreciate all your love and support, just like we always support each other here. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and let's dive right into today's story. You're in for something truly unforgettable. The night sparkled with golden lights, and the scent of expensive champagne lingering in the air as Billionaire CEO Armand Knight stepped out of his jet-black limousine, the city stretching beneath him like a kingdom he owned. His polished shoes clicked with authority as he approached the grand entrance of the most luxurious restaurant in town, where chandeliers shimmered like stars trapped in glass. On his arm was Sophie, the glamorous mistress who adored his wealth more than his heart, wearing a red silk dress that hugged her figure like temptation itself. They walked in like royalty, the world bowing to their power, waiters rushing to pull out chairs, and every whisper in the room buzzing about the cold billionaire who forgot what love tasted like. Armand's ego stood taller than any skyscraper he built, and he smirked, knowing people feared him, needed him, envied him. He believed tonight was just another evening of indulgence and pride. But fate had already written a twist sharp enough to pierce his stone heart. Armand lifts his wineglass, unaware destiny is already staring back at him. As Sophie giggles, flaunting her beauty and flipping her golden curls, Armand's eyes roam the room, hungry for admiration, until something unfamiliar tightens his chest. A waitress with dark wavy hair tied in a simple ponytail steps into view, her steps graceful but weary, as if she carried worlds on her shoulders. Her name tag reads, Amara. For a moment the name doesn't register until she turns around and their eyes collide. The room spins, his heart stumbles, his cold facade cracks like glass thrown against marble. Amara, his ex-wife, the woman he once vowed to protect, the woman whose tears he left behind without a goodbye. She was supposed to be gone from his world forever. Yet here she was, wearing a simple uniform instead of designer dresses he once bought her, her face still glowing with the same warmth he tried to forget. Armand's pulse begins racing. This can't be real, right? Sophie notices his sudden silence, but remains clueless as she rambles about the vacation he promised in Paris. But Armand isn't listening. His gaze drops lower, to the soft, unmistakable curve of a baby bump beneath Amara's apron. His jaw clenches so tight it hurts. A memory flashes, Amara laughing while holding a tiny crib catalogue, that life they almost had. His breathing falters, and he digs fingers into the tablecloth as if he might collapse. Amara avoids looking at him, but the tremble in her hands betrays her calm mask. She had rebuilt herself from heartbreak, forcing her tears into strength just to survive each day. She carries plates as if each one is a reminder of the life she lost when Armand walked away. Armand feels a surge of panic. Is that baby mine? The restaurant's energy shifts. Customers notice the billionaire suddenly frozen. Sophie frowns, whispering his name, but he doesn't react. His eyes blur with disbelief and jealousy. Who dared touch what once belonged to him? His breaths turn shallow as every second drags him deeper into a past he buried beneath money and power. Amara tries to walk past him, pretending he's a stranger, but he rises abruptly, causing chairs to screech. He stumbles closer, the floor unsteady beneath his $1,000,000 shoes. He hates how his heart aches. He hates that she still holds power over him. Armand's fingertips twitch, his voice trapped in his throat. Amara finally stops, forced by Armand's presence blocking her path. Her eyes shimmer with unshed tears. She once knew love in his embrace, and now she knows pain in his shadow. Her lips part, but words refuse to come out. The silence becomes a battlefield where both bleed. The sight of her pregnancy burns every regret he buried. His palms sweat, his body trembles. This strong man, who conquered everything, now feels defeated by one look from the woman he let go. Sophie rises angrily behind him, but he doesn't even acknowledge her existence anymore. Amara flinches as Armand leans closer, his scent igniting memories she swore to forget. The entire restaurant, once filled with laughter, now watches a storm unfold. No one dares blink. Armand whispers her name again, Amara, as if saying it might bring back time, might erase the choices that ruined them. She looks up, her voice barely a breath. Sir, I need to work. The word sir slices through him. Once, she called him love. The pain in her eyes is louder than screams. She tries to step away, but Armand gently grips the edge of her tray, his touch colder than ice, yet his tears burn hotter than fire inside. His gaze drops again to her belly. His vision darkens with fear, suspicion, longing and guilt all at once. Armand's lips part, his voice cracking beyond control. His heart bursts into 1,000 terrified questions. His hand rises slightly, wanting to feel that bump, the promise of a future he once dreamed of. But he stops inches away, afraid she might shatter if he touches her. His voice trembles, barely audible, yet echoing like thunder in the suffocating silence. Whose child is that? The tray slips from Amara's hands, plates crashing like exploding hearts, and she gasps, stunned by the cruelty of fate, making him witness the one thing that may not belong to him anymore. Sophie gasps in outrage behind them, but Armand doesn't care. His world narrows down to her tears, her breathing, her unborn child. His knees weaken, his skin pales, his heartbeat becomes a painful drum. She hasn't answered, and that silence is killing him. Amara's eyes blaze with a mix of fear, anger, and something heartbreakingly fragile. She isn't ready to face him. She isn't ready to dig up wounds that never healed. The restaurant manager approaches, demanding calm, but Armand doesn't move. He can't. He is stuck in the past, suffocating in regret. His mind screams, if that baby is mine, I abandoned them both. His world spins out of control, and he grips a nearby chair to just stay upright. Sophie pulls his arm, calling him insane, but he shakes her off like she's invisible. Amara presses a hand over her belly, protective, defensive, sending shockwaves through Armand's soul. A bitter realization claws into Armand. He still loves her. He always did. He just lost the courage to love. The sharp lights of the restaurant feel like spotlights exposing him, the heartless billionaire who failed the only woman who ever gave him warmth. His voice shakes again as he whispers, softer this time, almost pleading, Amara, please, I need to know. She steps back, eyes watering, lips trembling with words swallowed by fear. He reaches out, but stops short. He no longer has the right to touch her. His greatest nightmare stands in front of him. Another man may be living the life he ruined. Armand's vision sways. He might collapse at any second. Amara finally gathers the courage to speak, her voice sharp but breaking. This child is none of your concern. The sentence crushes Armand more violently than any business defeat he has ever faced. His chest tightens like a fist is squeezing his heart. He looks like a king losing his crown, his certainty, his soul. The mighty billionaire, powerful enough to destroy companies with a signature, can't even breathe right now. Sophie watches in shock, furious that she has been erased from his eyes entirely. The audience stares, hooked by a drama far richer than any meal they paid for. Armand stumbles back, emotionally collapsing, pupils wide with horror as he chokes out the broken question again. Amara, whose child is that? Armand's question. Whose child is that? Still vibrates inside Amara's bones as she forces herself to breathe, standing under the bright restaurant lights that feel too harsh, too exposing, like God himself is watching her secrets unravel. She presses a trembling hand to her chest, praying her heart would stop racing because she cannot let him see how deeply his sudden presence has shattered the last piece of peace she built for herself. She straightens her back, lifts her chin, and masks the terror within her eyes with a hollow, rehearsed smile. The same smile she has worn every day since the world forced her to survive alone, but Arman sees a crack in her mask, and his breath stumbles. Arman takes one slow step toward her, as if approaching a memory he never wanted to lose, his eyes shaking with disbelief. His chest rises sharply, then collapses, as though the air itself is fighting him. "You," he whispers, unable to finish the sentence because 1,000 questions storm through his mind. How is she here? Why is she working? And why is she pregnant? Amara grips her serving tray tighter, her knuckles pale as snow, forcing her lips to part. "Sir," she says with a cold professionalism that slices into his soul, "your table is waiting." She calls him sir, not Arman, and that alone is enough to break him. He watches in disbelief as she turns away, like he is nothing but a wealthy stranger, like she doesn't remember the nights she slept in his arms, the mornings she woke up beside the man she believed would love her until death separated them. Rage and panic collide in his chest, and he storms after her, ignoring Sophie's desperate grip on his arm, ignoring the eyes of every wealthy guest, staring at the scene that feels too personal, too raw. "Amara, look at me," he demands, but she keeps walking, her breath shaking as tears threaten to spill if she stops even for a second. His voice cracks. He never expected she'd ignore him. Arman barges into the kitchen behind her, the doors slamming so hard the entire staff flinches. "Talk to me," he growls, but the manager steps forward, standing between them. "Mr. Knight, we do not allow customers inside the kitchen," he warns sternly. Arman's fists clench. He could buy this restaurant 10 times over, destroy it overnight, but none of that matters, because the woman he once vowed to protect stands just inches away, trembling, her eyes filled with oceans of unsaid pain. Amara stares at him with a fierceness born from heartbreak. "You lost your right to question me the night you walked out without a goodbye." Her voice breaks, and it's the first time the restaurant sees her crack. Arman's hold on his composure slips. "You think I didn't suffer? You think I didn't—" But she cuts him off with a bitter laugh, a sound so empty he has to look away. "You disappeared," she cries, "as if our love meant nothing, as if I meant nothing." Every staff member goes silent. The noise of plates and cooking stops. They are witnessing a love story covered in scars. Arman opens his mouth to speak, but the very moment he does, she shields her belly with both hands, natural, instinctive, terrified, and his heart slams against his ribs. He realizes that bump is more than just a mystery. It's a threat to his sanity. His voice lowers into something desperate, afraid. "That baby. Amara, tell me." But before he can finish, Sophie bursts in, her anger loud enough to drown every heartbeat in the room. She grabs Arman's arm aggressively, as if pulling him back under her control. "Why are you entertaining this nobody?" She spits, eyes full of poisonous jealousy as she examines Amara from head to toe. "You really expect anyone to believe you're pregnant?" Sophie sneers. "You're just putting something under your shirt for attention." Sophie's insult is a spark, and Amara's fury is gasoline. Amara's heart slams against her ribs. She has survived humiliation, poverty, abandonment, but one thing she will never allow is someone insulting her unborn child. "If you think this is fake," Amara says through clenched teeth, her voice shaking with protective rage, "then you have no idea what real pain looks like." Sophie tries laughing it off, but her voice cracks slightly. She can see how serious Amara's expression is. Arman gently pulls Sophie away from Amara, a protective instinct he cannot control, rising inside him like wildfire. Sophie freezes. She has never seen Armand defend another woman like that. A seed of panic sprouts in Sophie's eyes. She might be losing the man she thought she owned. The tension becomes suffocating. A deep ache surges inside Amara's belly, and a sharp wince flashes across her face, but she tries to hide it. She doesn't want Armand to see her vulnerable again. "I don't owe you anything," she whispers weakly to Armand. "Not answers, not explanations. Nothing." She tries to walk away. She tries to be strong, but agony suddenly stabs deeper, ripping all strength out of her body. A gasping scream escapes her lips. The tray falls from her shaking hands, crashing into the floor, plates shattering like her courage. The entire kitchen erupts in panic. Mini cliffhanger. Something is terribly wrong, and Armand knows it. Armand drops to her side instantly, his heart beating so fast it hurts. "Amara!" Hey, look at me," he pleads, his hand hovering an inch above her belly, afraid to touch, afraid of making anything worse. Amara's breath quickens, tears streaming as she curls protectively around her stomach. Her worst fear is coming true. Not here, not now. Sophie stands frozen, guilt and fear fighting inside her expression, because suddenly this isn't jealousy or drama. This is life and death. Armand's voice shakes because he has never been this powerless before. "Call an ambulance!" someone shouts. Staff run in every direction. The manager calls emergency medical services, while Armand desperately tries to keep Amara conscious. "Stay with me," he whispers. "Don't close your eyes. Please." She tries speaking, but the pain steals the words from her tongue, until finally a broken cry escapes her, raw and terrified. "Don't hurt my baby, Armand." Those 5 words rip through him like bullets. His chest tightens so hard he can't breathe, because that sentence confirms everything. She thinks he was the monster who destroyed their happiness, and the father of the child she's fighting to bring into this world. He swallows past the agony, clogging his throat, his voice destroyed by emotion as he whispers back, "I won't let anything hurt you, not anymore." His trembling hand, for the first time in years, rests over her belly, and he prays the life he may have created isn't slipping away again. Armand's heartbeat was a wrecked drum inside his chest as he scooped Amara into his arms, her soft whimpers stabbing him with guilt, fear, and a love he swore he buried long ago. And as he stormed past Sophie, who shrieked his name in disbelief, he didn't even glance back, not once, because in that moment the entire universe narrowed to the fragile woman trembling against him, the woman he had once vowed to protect with his life, but instead abandoned in a storm of grief, leaving her to drown alone. The cold night air slapped his face as he rushed to his sleek black car, his jaw locked with determination, and when Amara's fingers weakly clutched his shirt as if begging him not to let go, his breath cracked in his throat, for it felt like fate had dragged him back to the moment where he failed her before. But this time, he refused to lose what might still be his. Sophie screams after him, "Armand, she's lying. That baby isn't yours." And he grips the steering wheel hard enough to break it. The ride to the hospital was chaos, wrapped in silence. Amara's soft gasps echoing like broken nightmares, Armand's eyes flicking from the road to her belly every second, terrified he'd be too late again, terrified the universe was punishing him for running from love. His mind replayed the night that destroyed them. Amara crying in a hospital bed after the miscarriage, her hands shaking over the empty space where hope once lived, while Armand froze, numb, running from emotions he didn't know how to bear, choosing work, power, business, anything to avoid facing the image of their lost baby haunting him every night. So he left, too broken to stay, and that mistake became the monster that devoured their marriage. He whispers, "Not again, please, not again," as her eyes flutter shut. The emergency room lights were blinding when he rushed her in, calling for help like a madman stripped of pride, and doctors swarmed around them, asking questions he couldn't answer because all he could hear was the echo of his own heartbeat threatening to fail him. When they took her from his arms, he almost chased after, almost begged them not to separate him from her, but he forced himself still, fingers clenched so tightly that his nails pierced his palm, eyes glued to the door, praying to a God he stopped believing in years ago. Time feels like death when the door doesn't open, minutes stretched into a punishment, gnawing his sanity raw, until finally the doctor stepped back out, calm eyes, steady expression, and said the words that made Armand's legs threaten to collapse. "Both mother and baby are fine." Armand exhaled like a drowning man finally breaking the surface, his shoulders trembling under the weight of relief as powerful as pain. But before he could breathe again, the doctor warned that Amara was highly stressed and needed emotional stability. Something Armand realized he had never once given her. Guilt slammed him like a truck, but he nodded, eager to do anything, everything, just to see her safe and happy. Yet when he stepped into her room, Amara turned her head away, cold, strong, and heartbreakingly distant, like a woman who had learned the hard way never to trust the hands that once promised to hold her. She refused to look at him, refused to thank him, refused to show even a crack in her wall of independence. And when he offered to handle all hospital bills, she bit her lip, her voice tight with resentment as she murmured that the baby had a father already, someone better than Armand ever was. Jealousy ignites like gasoline inside him as he demands, "Who?" But Amara just clutched her belly protectively and closed her eyes, refusing him entry into her shattered world, and that rejection felt like a blade twisting inside his ribcage. He took a small step back, but his eyes never left her, tracing every silent tear she tried to hide, every breath that shook with fear and strength all at once, and his brain screamed that something wasn't adding up. There was no engagement ring, no name spoken, no love shining in her eyes when she mentioned this other man, just panic and secrets she was terrified to let slip. Armand realizes this new father might not even exist. That suspicion, that burning terror that consumed his veins, pushed Armand into a dark decision he justified as protection, even though he knew it was a violation. He cornered a private doctor in the hallway and demanded a secret DNA test. His voice deadly calm, his eyes cold enough to cut through steel. The doctor hesitated, mentioning consent, legality, ethics. But Armand's power was a weapon sharper than morality, and one quiet threat made the doctor obey, taking a sample without Amara knowing, sealing Armand's fate in secrecy. "Find out the truth," Armand orders, "no matter what it costs." As the doctor left to analyze the blood sample, Armand stood outside Amara's door, fingers pressed against the glass, watching her sleep, her hand resting protectively over her unborn child, like a shield forged by love, stronger than anything he had ever given her. Emotion strangled his throat, regret, love, dread, all swirling into a storm he could no longer run from. He remembered the way she used to laugh, the way she used to hold his face like he was her entire world, the way she begged him not to shut her out after their loss, and how he walked away anyway, choosing loneliness disguised as strength. He whispers through the glass, "If that baby is mine, I won't lose you again." Footsteps echoed down the corridor like the arrival of fate itself, and Armand straightened, his pulse hammering in his ears as the doctor approached, holding a closed file, one thin folder that could either destroy the last piece of his heart or resurrect a love he thought was dead. The doctor's face carried zero expression, professional and unreadable, which only fed the terror-sinking claws into Armand's chest. His hand shakes as he reaches for the file, terrified to know the truth. The air felt heavier than gravity itself, silence swallowing every sound in the hospital as the doctor slowly lifted his eyes to meet Armand's, deadly serious, no softness left in his voice, no hesitation left in his stance, as if this result would shatter more than just paperwork. Armand swallowed hard, his throat tight, bracing himself for a revelation that could either redeem his soul or burn him alive all over again. The doctor opens the file and begins to speak. The sterile hum of the hospital room seemed to amplify every heartbeat as the doctor placed the file gently on the polished table, his hands trembling slightly, betraying the gravity of what he was about to reveal. Armand's eyes, sharp and restless, darted between the doctor and Amara, sensing a storm about to break. The doctor cleared his throat, his gaze lingering on Armand with a mixture of pity and concern, and handed him the file as if passing a time bomb. Armand's fingers shook as he opened the folder, scanning line after line, each word a knife twisting deeper into his chest. When his eyes finally rested on the conclusive report, a cold silence filled the room, broken only by the faint beeping of the machines in the corner. 99.9% match. He was the father. His heart, which had been racing, seemed to stop altogether, suspended in disbelief. For a moment, his mind froze, unable to process the truth that his child, the very essence of his love for Amara, was his. Relief, joy, and confusion collided violently within him, leaving him gasping for air. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, to voice the torrent of emotions that had built up for months, Amara's hand shot forward with a speed and force that startled him, snatching the file from his grip. Her eyes blazed like fire, filled with fury and pain, and her voice cracked with anguish as she screamed, "You had no right! No right to test my baby!" The words hit him like icy rain, freezing the warmth that had begun to blossom in his chest, and he recoiled slightly, unsure how to bridge the sudden chasm between them. Amara's face was flushed with emotion, her trembling lips betraying a storm of terror and resentment she had carried alone, and her words fell like shards of glass, cutting through the fragile hope he had dared to feel. "Do you have any idea what I've lived through, Armand?" she demanded, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Afraid you, or your family, would take my baby away, just like they tried to take everything else from me. Afraid you'd destroy the life I've fought so hard to protect." Her confession landed like a hammer, shattering the calm he thought he had maintained. Armand's chest tightened, a surge of guilt and helplessness crashing over him, but before he could voice even a single word of defense, the room's heavy door swung open with a commanding force, and a tall, impeccably dressed man strode in, exuding confidence and authority. His eyes locked on Amara with an unsettling mix of possessiveness and tenderness, and his voice carried a tone that demanded attention. "Amara," he said smoothly, "you're mine. And soon, our child will be as well." Armand froze, disbelief flooding his senses. The man, introducing himself as Ray, claimed not only to be Amara's fiancé, but also the soon-to-be father of her child. His words landed like bombs in Armand's mind, unraveling the fragile reality he had just begun to piece together. Ray stepped closer, wrapping a protective arm around Amara, drawing her close to his chest, and in a motion that seemed both gentle and possessive, kissed her forehead. Armand's blood ran cold, his fingers clenching into fists as every instinct screamed that this was a lie, a manipulation meant to crush him. "No one will take my child, or my wife," he growled under his breath, a promise forged in the furnace of betrayal and love. Amara's eyes darted between him and Ray, confusion and fear mingling with an undeniable longing, and for a fleeting moment Armand saw the woman he loved caught in the crossfire of their worlds. His mind raced, remembering the nights he had spent, imagining the life he would build with her and the baby, imagining laughter filling the halls of a home that now seemed at risk of slipping through his fingers. Ray's hand tightened on her shoulder, an unspoken warning that he was not a man to be trifled with, yet Armand's resolve hardened, a storm gathering in his chest. How could this man walk in and claim what Armand knew was his by blood, by love, by destiny? The doctor watched silently, sensing the tension crackling like electricity as Armand took a slow, deliberate step forward, his eyes never leaving Ray, a silent declaration that he would not back down. Amara trembled, caught between relief at seeing Armand's determination and fear of the storm she knew was coming. "Ray," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but he silenced her with a subtle shake of his head, asserting his dominance, leaving Armand's chest burning with fury and desperation. Time seemed to slow as Armand's memories of stolen glances, secret touches, and whispered promises flashed through his mind, each one reinforcing the truth he refused to let go of. Amara was his heart, and the baby was his future. With a growl that seemed to resonate from the deepest part of his soul, he stepped even closer, unafraid of the confrontation, unafraid of the towering man before him. "I won't let you take her away," Armand said, his voice low, steady, and lethal with determination. "Not now." Not ever. Amara's lips parted in surprise, her heart beating frantically, unsure whether to cry or hope, while Ray's expression hardened, sensing an unexpected challenge to the authority he thought he wielded. The air between the three of them crackled with tension, so thick it felt almost tangible, a silent countdown before the storm would break. Armand's mind whirled with questions he could not yet voice. Who was Ray, really? Was this man telling the truth? Or was he part of some cruel deception designed to hurt him? And most pressing of all, how could he protect Amara and their child from the web of lies and claims that threatened to engulf them both? Every instinct in him screamed that the answers lay only in confronting the truth head-on, yet fear tugged at the edges of his resolve, a quiet whisper that warned him of consequences, yet unseen. Amara's hand brushed against his arm, a fleeting connection that reignited the fire in his chest, a reminder of the bond they shared, a bond that no one, not even a man claiming to be her fiancé, could sever. Ray's grip on Amara tightened imperceptibly, a silent warning that he was not to be underestimated. Yet Armand's gaze never wavered, unflinching in the face of the threat. The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of impending confrontation pressing on every shoulder, every breath, every heartbeat. And in that suspended moment, as the truth threatened to explode into chaos, Armand's fists remained clenched, his jaw tight, and a storm of determination flashed in his eyes that promised one thing above all else. He would fight for his child. He would fight for Amara, and no force on earth would stand in his way. The quiet before the storm was broken only by the soft, fearful whisper of Amara's voice, "Armand, please." And in that whisper lay the tension of 1,000 unspoken fears, 1,000 possibilities, each one threatening to tip the delicate balance of love, betrayal, and destiny that hung precariously in the room. The air vibrated with unspoken threats and unresolved truths, a moment frozen in time with only one certainty. The battle for Amara and their child had begun, and neither love nor loyalty would allow Armand to back down. Ray's eyes narrowed, sensing an unspoken challenge, while Armand's heart thundered with the knowledge that the next moments could change everything, and Amara, trembling, realized that the world she had tried to protect her baby from was now colliding violently with the man who had always been her anchor. And as the tension mounted, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first move, the first word, the first crack in the fragile armor of deception that threatened to destroy them all. In that frozen heartbeat, the silent promise in Armand's eyes shone brighter than any threat, louder than any claim, and more unyielding than any fear. "No one will take my child or my wife." 5. Arman didn't sleep that night. His mind raced with the images of Ray's smug confidence, the way he held Amara as though she belonged to him, the possessive kiss that burned into Arman's memory like a brand. By the first streaks of dawn, he had cancelled every meeting, refused calls from his business partners, and turned down invitations that would have once made him feel untouchable. Nothing mattered anymore but Amara, the child growing inside her, and the looming shadow of Ray, who dared to claim what was rightfully his. He drove to the restaurant multiple times that week, standing outside, watching Amara move gracefully among tables, her smile polite yet distant, her eyes shadowed by worry, and he felt a stab of helplessness pierce him every time she glanced away, pretending not to see him. He tried every way to reach her, offering protection, a new mansion far from her past, financial freedom beyond imagination, promises of a future she had once dreamed of with him. But each offer was met with a quiet refusal, a gentle shake of her head, and a reminder that love wasn't something that could be bought, that forgiveness wasn't a currency that could be spent. Each rejection cut him deeper, but Arman refused to retreat. He studied Ray from afar, noticing inconsistencies in his behavior. The way Ray's hand trembled slightly when a call came in, the dark glint in his eyes when he whispered into the phone, the way his jaw tightened as if negotiating something far more sinister than a simple deal. Every instinct Arman had screamed that Ray was dangerous, that beneath the charming facade was a man who thrived on manipulation, control, and threats. One evening, when the restaurant was dim and emptying, Arman noticed Ray stepping outside, his phone pressed tightly to his ear, his words low but urgent, his tone edged with malice. Curiosity and fury spurred Arman to follow him. He trailed Ray through narrow alleys and abandoned streets, his heart pounding not just from exertion, but from the anticipation of discovering what the man dared to hide. Ray finally stopped in front of a dilapidated warehouse, the kind of place that reeked of secrecy and danger. Arman crouched in the shadows, his pulse quickening, and watched as Ray slipped inside, phone still pressed to his ear. Moments later, a small, nervous-looking courier arrived, carrying a package, and Ray took it, flipping through its contents with a smile that made Arman's blood run cold. Photos, dozens of them. Amara, pregnant, vulnerable, unaware of being watched, negotiating gently yet firmly, completely oblivious to the camera that captured her every movement. Arman's fists clenched so tight that his nails dug into his palms. He could feel a low growl building in his chest, a primal rage that threatened to consume him. Ray's voice, low and sinister, floated through the warehouse, whispering about a price, discussing how he could use these images to leverage Arman's enemies, how he could sell Amara, his own baby, to those who craved power and vengeance. Arman's fingers itched to act, to strike, but he knew he had to be smart. He pulled out his phone and began recording, capturing every word, every motion, every flicker of malice in Ray's expression, each frame a weapon for the battle that had already begun. The tension grew unbearable, and just as Arman thought he might safely retreat, a shadow fell across his hiding spot. Ray's head snapped in his direction, his eyes widening with recognition, and in the next heartbeat he charged forward, a knife glinting under the dim light, his face twisted with rage and betrayal. Arman barely had time to react. He dove to the side, rolling over cracked concrete, his heart hammering in his chest as the knife embedded itself in a wooden post mere inches from where he had been. He scrambled to his feet, sprinting into the night with the evidence safely tucked away, his lungs burning, every step a mix of fear and determination. The wind howled around him as he raced through the city streets, shadows of abandoned buildings and flickering streetlights painting a cinematic backdrop to his desperate flight. Ray's furious shouts echoed behind him, promising pain, warning of consequences, but Arman did not look back. His only thought was Amara, the life she carried, and the lengths he would go to protect them both. Finally, in a burst of adrenaline, he reached the hospital, the sterile lights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope, and just as he reached the front doors, his phone buzzed violently. "Ray," Arman answered with a trembling hand, fury coiling in his veins, and the voice on the other end was chillingly calm, eerily controlled. "I've called an ambulance for Amara," Ray said smoothly, the underlying threat unmistakable, sending a jolt of fear through Arman's chest. "Don't be late, Arman, or it might be too late." The line went dead, leaving Arman standing frozen, every nerve on fire, every muscle tense, the storm of rage and dread inside him now fully unleashed, his fists clenched once more, a burning resolve searing through him. Nothing, no one would harm Amara or their child, not Ray, not his enemies, not the cruel twists of fate that seemed determined to test him at every turn. And as he bolted toward the emergency entrance, adrenaline and fear mingling into a lethal combination, he knew that the battle for their hearts, their lives, and their future had escalated into a war that would not end until every threat had been extinguished, every betrayal exposed, and every shadow that loomed over Amara's life had been destroyed. Every step he took carried the weight of love, obsession, and vengeance, and as the automatic doors swung open, revealing the cold, antiseptic corridor of the hospital, he saw no one between him and Amara, but he could sense Ray's hand in everything, the manipulations, the threats, the dark schemes waiting in the shadows. The nurse at the reception looked up in surprise as Arman barreled past, his voice low but urgent, demanding to know where Amara was, and every second of delay felt like an eternity, every tick of the clock a countdown to potential disaster. And then, at the end of the corridor, a shadow shifted, a wheeled stretcher appearing in the distance, an unmistakable figure lying upon it, covered in a thin blanket, the outline of a swollen belly betraying the life within, and Arman's heart seized with both terror and relief as he realized that the next moments would decide everything, the fate of Amara, of their unborn child, and of the man who dared to threaten them. Arman's boots echoed like thunder against the polished floors of the hospital corridor as he raced toward the emergency ward, his chest heaving with a mix of fear, rage, and helpless desperation, every second stretching into an eternity as the image of Amara on the stretcher seared into his mind. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils, cutting through the chaotic whirlwind in his head, yet nothing could dull the sharp terror he felt at the thought of losing her or their unborn child. Nurses and doctors stepped aside, sensing the urgency in his eyes and the lethal intensity in his stride, and he skidded to a halt at the bedside, where Amara lay pale and motionless, the rhythmic beeping of monitors echoing the fragile pulse of hope that still clung to the room. Tubes and wires connected her to life-saving machines, each one a lifeline keeping both mother and child tethered to this world, and Arman's hands shook violently as he reached out, brushing the hair from her damp forehead, tracing the delicate curve of her face, as if memorizing it, in case the world would take it from him. The doctors, faces grim yet professional, gathered around him, explaining in clipped, urgent tones the extent of the danger. Stress-induced early labor, risks to both Amara and the baby, and the delicate balance between hope and tragedy. Arman's chest tightened, every word a blow to his already fragile composure, and he swallowed hard, trying to force the panic down, trying to steel himself against the tidal wave of fear, but the weight of helplessness pressed down on him like stone. Outside the room, unbeknownst to Arman, Ray stood pretending to cry, wiping his eyes and lowering his head as though stricken by remorse, yet every tear was a mask, every sniffle a lie. In reality, he was meticulously deleting contacts, hiding his passport, and securing a bag of cash, plotting to flee the moment the money from his blackmail arrived, leaving Amara and the baby behind as pawns in his cruel game. But Arman had not underestimated him. Clutching the evidence he had risked his life to capture, The photos, the recordings, the proof of Ray's treachery, Armand stormed through the automatic doors, unrelenting, his rage like a tidal wave, and the security cameras seemed to blur under the force of his determination. He slammed the evidence onto the reception desk, the papers scattering like a storm of truth, demanding that the police act, and within seconds, officers swarmed Ray, handcuffing him instantly, exposing every lie, every betrayal, every cold, calculating move he had made against Amara and Arman. Ray struggled, shouting, clawing at the cuffs, his smug facade crumbling under the weight of justice. Yet outside, he cast a fleeting, venomous glance at Arman, a silent promise that this war was far from over. Arman, however, did not look at Ray. His eyes remained fixed on Amara, his heart hammering in his chest as if it too were connected to the fragile monitor beeping beside her bed. He sank into the chair beside her, the exhaustion of the night and the weight of guilt crashing over him, and for the first time in months he allowed himself to break, to let tears spill silently down his face, his lips trembling as he whispered apologies to the woman who had endured so much, for every tear she had shed because of him, for every moment of fear and doubt he had caused. His hand hovered over her swollen belly, trembling as though even the slightest touch could undo the fragility of life within, and he felt the surreal, sacred responsibility of being a guardian he had never imagined he would need to be, a protector, not just of Amara, but of the very essence of their shared love. And then, just as the tension seemed almost unbearable, the monitors began to beep faster, the sound cutting through the room like an alarm of hope, and Amara's fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttering as if struggling to pierce the fog of unconsciousness. Armand's breath caught in his throat, his pulse racing as he leaned closer, his forehead resting against the cold edge of the hospital bed, holding his breath as if even the slightest movement might cause her to slip away. Slowly, her eyes opened, shimmering, unfocused at first, then locking onto him. And in a whisper that seemed to carry the weight of every fear, every loneliness, every betrayal she had endured, she spoke a single word, fragile yet shattering. "Why did you leave me?" The room seemed to spin around Arman, his knees weakening, his vision blurring with tears he could no longer restrain as he pressed a hand to his lips, fighting to steady his voice even as his soul cracked open. "Because," he choked, each syllable a painful confession, each word dripping with the weight of guilt and love. "I thought you didn't want our first baby." Her eyes widened, a mixture of hurt, disbelief, and fragile hope shimmering in their depths, and the tension between them hung like a fragile thread, trembling under the weight of unspoken truths, past mistakes, and the urgent need to reclaim the bond that had been threatened but never broken. Outside the room, the faint shuffle of police and hospital staff created a backdrop of tension, and the possibility of danger, even with Ray detained, lingered like a shadow, a reminder that while one battle was won, the war for Amara's safety, their love, and the baby's future was far from over. Arman's tears fell freely now, cascading down his cheeks as he whispered promises only she could hear, pledging to never leave her again, to shield her from every threat, to honor the life they had created together, even as the monitors continued to beep steadily, marking the fragile line between survival and tragedy. And just as he leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently to hers, Amara's lips trembled, forming the ghost of a smile, a fragile connection that promised both forgiveness and the beginning of a new, uncertain journey. But in that moment, the uncertainty of tomorrow loomed large. Every heartbeat, every flicker of movement, every shadow outside that hospital room whispered of challenges yet to come, of battles yet to be fought, and of secrets still lurking in the darkness. The war for their love, their family, and their future had only just begun, and Arman knew with a fierce, unbreakable certainty that he would face every storm, every threat, and every betrayal to protect Amara and their child. and in the quiet hum of the monitors, with her small hand brushing weakly against his, he whispered again, a vow sealed with tears, "I will never leave you. I will never let anything happen to you, or our baby." But even as the words left his lips, the echo of her question, "Why did you leave me?" resonated through him like a drumbeat of guilt, hope, and the fragile possibility of redemption, leaving the chapter suspended on the edge of revelation, love, and the unbreakable bond between a father, a mother, and the child whose life hung delicately between them. 7. The soft hum of the hospital machines filled the room as Arman's fingers lingered over Amara's, their delicate interlacing a fragile bridge of trust and love that had survived betrayal, fear, and time, and for the first time in months he allowed himself to breathe, to feel the warmth of the woman he had fought for, the mother of his child, whose presence seemed to mend the cracks in his soul that he hadn't even realized had been bleeding. Amara's eyes shimmered with tears, the color deepened by exhaustion, fear, and unspoken longing, and when she finally spoke, her voice was a fragile whisper that trembled with both sorrow and courage. "Arman, I never stopped loving you." The words fell like a gentle avalanche, overwhelming him with relief, guilt, and a desperate need to make things right, and he leaned closer, brushing a tear from her cheek with the gentlest touch, as if even the slightest pressure could fracture her. She continued, her voice catching, "I fought your cold, cruel family alone. I defended your name when everyone wanted me gone, when everyone whispered that I didn't deserve you, that I was unworthy, and every day I stood my ground, hoping, praying, that somehow you would see me." Arman's throat tightened, his pulse hammering in his ears, each word piercing the armor of silence he had built around himself, revealing the depth of her strength and the pain she had endured in solitude. And he felt shame for every moment he had doubted her, for every second he had let his pride blind him. "And when I lost our first baby..." Her voice broke completely, tears spilling freely now, trailing down her cheeks and dripping onto the sterile sheets. "I begged you to stay. I begged you not to disappear into your cold world, a world that seemed to have no place for love, but somehow you only heard your own pain." Arman's heart twisted violently, guilt and horror washing over him in waves, each pulse a reminder of the years he had squandered, of the distance he had allowed to grow between them, and he pressed his lips gently against her forehead, his hand trembling as it hovered protectively over her belly, feeling the tiny life inside, the miracle they had created together. He whispered, barely audible, "I hear you now, Amara. I see everything. I promise you, I will change. I will protect you. I will protect our child with my life, and I will never let anyone hurt either of you again." Amara's fingers twitched, intertwining with his in a gesture that carried years of longing, sorrow, and unspoken apologies, and for the first time in countless nights of fear and heartache, their souls seemed to touch without barriers, without walls, without hesitation. But just as the fragile sense of peace began to settle over them, the sharp click of the hospital doors shattered the moment, and Arman's muscles tensed instantly, every instinct screaming that danger, or at least chaos, had arrived. A voice, dripping with false sweetness and venom, cut through the quiet like a blade. "Well, well, what a touching reunion." Both Arman and Amara turned their heads, and standing in the doorway was Sophie, her heels clicking confidently against the tile, her toxic smirk radiating audacity, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and mischief, as though she had been waiting for this exact moment to assert dominance over the fragile bond before her. Arman's jaw tightened, a surge of protective fury coursing through him, and his hand instinctively brushed over Amara's, holding her as if shielding her from the storm Sophie was about to unleash. Sophie's eyes flicked to the hospital bed, taking in the sight of Amara, swollen with life, vulnerable yet radiant, and a malicious smile curved her lips as she spoke again, voice venomous and teasing. Did you think it would just be you two? That I would stand quietly in the background while your little fairy tale played out? Amara's heart skipped a beat, panic flaring inside her chest as her grip on Arman tightened, while Arman's gaze sharpened like steel, his entire body coiling in readiness to defend them, yet he kept his voice calm, low and dangerous. "Sophie, don't even think about it." Sophie laughed, a cold musical sound that echoed through the room, her presence radiating defiance and a dangerous unpredictability. Then, with deliberate, theatrical slowness, she reached into her designer bag, producing a small, crumpled object, and Arman's eyes narrowed as she held it up with a flourish. The world seemed to shrink around them, the hospital walls fading into insignificance as the final proof of her audacity became visible. A positive pregnancy test, clear and undeniable, and Sophie's smirk widened, her voice ringing with triumph and accusation. "He belongs to me!" The words hit Arman like a physical blow, twisting his stomach, igniting a surge of confusion, anger, and disbelief, while Amara gasped, her body trembling as she tried to process the sudden, sharp intrusion into their moment of fragile reconciliation. Arman's mind raced, every instinct screaming that this was a lie, a manipulation, a desperate ploy from someone who thrived on chaos, yet the undeniable evidence in Sophie's hand created a horrifying possibility he could not ignore. His fingers tightened around Amara's, drawing strength from her presence, even as his mind catalogued every scenario, every risk, every threat to the family he was only beginning to rebuild. Sophie took a slow step forward, her heels clicking, eyes flashing with venom, daring him to react, testing the boundaries of his restraint, and Arman's entire being coiled like a spring, ready to explode at the first sign of movement toward Amara. Amara's breathing grew shallow, panic rising, and she whispered, voice shaking, "Arman, what does she mean?" Arman's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing to sharp slits as he swallowed his rising fury, forcing his mind to think, to strategize, to protect before responding, yet every fiber of his being screamed to confront Sophie and destroy the threat she represented. Sophie's smirk deepened, sensing his internal battle, and she raised her voice, ensuring that every nurse, every passerby in the corridor could hear, "You see, Arman? I'm carrying a part of you now, and no one, absolutely no one, will take me away from what's mine." The air thickened with tension, the beeping of the monitors suddenly fading into insignificance compared to the storm of emotion and fear swirling in the room, and Arman's hand instinctively moved to shield Amara, his eyes locking onto Sophie with lethal determination. Every thought in his mind screamed at him to act, to protect, to expose the lie he knew Sophie was spinning, yet the sight of the pregnancy test in her hand was enough to plant doubt, enough to ignite fear, enough to challenge his composure in ways he hadn't anticipated. Amara pressed herself closer to him instinctively, trembling, while Arman's chest heaved with a mix of rage, fear, and determination, and he realized in that instant that this battle was no longer about him or Sophie. It was about safeguarding their child, their love, and the fragile peace they had only just begun to reclaim. And as Sophie's smirk widened, as she stood triumphantly in the doorway, holding the test high, the room seemed to hold its breath, every second stretching into a taut, suspenseful line, leaving Arman, Amara, and the audience suspended in the edge of an impending confrontation that promised to shatter the fragile threads of trust, love, and hope that had taken so long to rebuild, the words ringing in his ears like a challenge he could not ignore. "He belongs to me!" The hospital room, once a sanctuary of fragile hope and whispered promises, fell into a heavy, suffocating silence as Sophie's voice cut through like a serrated blade, sharp, demanding, and full of false triumph. "I want the world to know our future family begins today. Everyone deserves to celebrate Arman and me." Her tone dripped with arrogance, the kind that dared the universe to challenge her, and every word felt like a slap to Amara's heart, a cruel intrusion into the fragile peace she had only just begun to feel. Amara's hand trembled against her belly, tears pooling in her eyes as she clung to Arman, desperate for protection, desperate for the reassurance that the man beside her, the father of her child, would not allow this interloper to distort their reality. Arman's gaze hardened, the steel of his resolve flashing in his eyes, and for a long, tense moment he simply stared at Sophie, the room holding its collective breath. Then, without a word, he threw back his head and let out a bitter, deep laugh, the sound echoing through the sterile walls, like the roar of a storm long contained, sending a chill down Sophie's spine and shocking every onlooker into silence. "You really think you can trap me with lies?" he said slowly, voice low, deliberate, lethal. "You think I could have children with anyone but Amara?" His words hung in the air like a guillotine, and then he revealed the truth that shattered Sophie's facade. After losing their first child, he had undergone a vasectomy. He physically could not father children anymore, except with Amara, the one woman whose body, heart and soul were inexplicably intertwined with his own. The room seemed to spin, Sophie's confident smirk faltering as confusion, panic and fear overtook her carefully constructed arrogance. And for the first time, Arman saw the mask crack, revealing the desperate, deceitful woman beneath. "No, that can't be true," she stammered, her voice shaking, her composure crumbling under the weight of undeniable reality. The truth slammed into her like a tidal wave. She had forged everything, the positive test, the manipulations, the lies, all intended to trap him for money, fame, and a moment of cruel revenge. Arman's jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides, and without hesitation, hospital security and guards moved in, their presence authoritative, unyielding, dragging Sophie toward the door as she screamed, cursed, and clawed at the air, her voice a chaotic echo of rage and defeat, but powerless against the combined force of truth and justice. Amara, trembling, sobbed openly now, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and raw emotion flooding her entire being, and as she buried her face against Arman's chest, she finally realized, in a way that no words could capture, that she and their baby were his only destiny, the center of his heart, and the only family he would ever truly claim. Arman knelt beside her, his lips pressing gently against the curve of her swollen belly, feeling the tiny, miraculous life moving within her, promising silently, fiercely, that he would complete the family he had once destroyed through mistakes, absence, and fear. "I will protect you," he whispered, his voice trembling yet resolute, "and I will finish what we started. Together, as a family." But even as hope began to bloom, fragile and radiant, chaos erupted without warning. Amara's body tensed, a sharp gasp escaping her lips, and in a sudden, uncontrollable rush, her water broke, drenching the sheets and signaling the urgent onset of labor. Nurses and doctors swarmed the room instantly, their voices urgent, calm, yet filled with tension, moving swiftly to stabilize her and prepare for delivery. While Arman's heart pounded violently, every nerve alight with fear, adrenaline, and anticipation, gripping her hand, refusing to let go, as if the very act of holding her could protect them both from the storm to come. The corridor outside the room filled with activity, alarms subtly blaring, monitors beeping in rapid succession, the tension so thick it seemed to press down on every chest in the vicinity, and Arman followed closely as Amara was whisked away on the stretcher, the sterile smell of antiseptic mixing with the sharp metallic scent of imminent crisis. Every step toward the delivery room was a countdown, every moment stretching into an eternity, and Arman's mind spun with fears, memories and prayers, silently begging the universe for a miracle. Then, as the team prepared for the delicate, high-stakes procedure, A voice from the surgical team cut through the controlled chaos, calm but ominous. "We can only save one." The words struck him like a thunderclap, freezing him mid-step, constricting his chest with a terror so raw it nearly made him collapse, and the world seemed to narrow down to the two lives lying in the balance: his beloved Amara and their unborn child. Time itself seemed to stretch, each second ticking with unbearable weight as he stood at the threshold, hands clenched so tightly that the knuckles whitened, gripping the edge of the gurney like a lifeline, every heartbeat a deafening drumbeat of fear, love, and desperation. Nurses whispered instructions, doctors moved with precise, controlled urgency, and the sterile room became a battlefield where hope and tragedy intertwined, every gesture and decision carrying the weight of life and death. Arman's mind raced through every possibility, every scenario, every outcome, refusing to let despair claim him. His entire being focused on the child growing inside her, on the miracle they had fought so hard to protect, on the life he had promised to safeguard at all costs. Outside the delivery room, the muted sounds of the hospital seemed to fade away, leaving only the rapid beeping of monitors and the low, tense voices of the medical staff, each syllable a reminder that the stakes had never been higher, that the battle for love, family, and survival had reached its most critical, heart-wrenching climax. Amara's hand, small and trembling, slipped into his, and he pressed a gentle kiss over it, feeling the warmth, the pulse, the fragile life she carried, and vowed silently, fiercely, that he would not lose either of them, no matter the cost. And as the operating lights cast stark, blinding illumination across the room, Arman's breath caught, his body frozen with a mix of hope and dread, because the words, "We can only save one," hung in the air like an unrelenting shadow, leaving the chapter suspended on the knife edge of life, love, and impossible choice, the tension palpable, the fate of Amara and their unborn child uncertain, and the audience breathless with the anticipation of what would come next. 9. The doors of the delivery room burst open in a sudden, violent motion as Arman's entire being surged forward, propelled by a force stronger than fear, anger, or exhaustion, pure, desperate love. He didn't think, he didn't calculate, he simply ran, crashing through the sterile corridor, each step echoing like a drumbeat of urgency, heart pounding so violently that it felt as though it might shatter his chest. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his hands trembled, not from fatigue, but from the sheer, uncontainable terror of losing the two people who were the very core of his existence: Amara, the woman who had endured so much for love, and their child, the fragile miracle of their union. He fell to his knees beside the gurney, his forehead pressing against the cool surface as he begged, voice raw and trembling, "Please, please, they must both live. I'll give everything. I'll do anything. Don't take them from me." His words echoed in the sterile room, bouncing off the walls, mixing with the controlled chaos of medical staff moving with precise urgency. Yet he felt as though time itself had stopped, as though the entire world had been reduced to this single, fragile, impossible moment suspended between life and death. The monitors beeped rapidly, the lights above casting stark illumination over the sweat and tension on every face, and Arman's entire being was consumed with the realization that love was not power, not control, not pride, not vengeance. It was vulnerability, it was fear, it was the paralyzing, overwhelming terror of imagining a life without the people who made his heart beat. His hands hovered over Amara's belly, gripping it lightly as if he could transfer some of his strength into her, as if sheer will alone could protect them, and tears, unrestrained and hot, ran freely down his face, carving trails through the exhaustion, guilt, and relief that warred within him. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, each second a cruel test, and Armand clung to hope with every fibre of his being, whispering prayers under his breath, promising silently that if they survived, he would never let anything tear them apart again. And then, finally, the door swung open once more, and the doctor, face calm yet triumphant, approached, holding a tiny, wriggling bundle swaddled in soft blankets. "Congratulations," he said gently, his voice carrying the weight of every tense, agonizing moment. "Both mother and child are safe." Armand's knees nearly gave out beneath him, his hands shaking as he reached for the baby, cradling her fragile form with the reverence of a man who had stared into the abyss and emerged humbled, transformed. The tiny cry of their newborn daughter pierced his heart, a sound so pure, so miraculous that it seemed to erase every moment of fear, pain, and doubt that had preceded it. And he held her close, feeling the delicate warmth, the soft pulse of life against his chest, the very embodiment of hope, love, and the second chance he had begged for with every ounce of his soul. Amara, pale but radiant, smiled weakly, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to him, her hand brushing against his, and in that instant the weight of past mistakes, betrayals, and misunderstandings dissolved, leaving only the undeniable, unbreakable bond of family, love, and shared triumph over the darkness that had threatened to consume them. Armand pressed his lips gently to Amara's forehead, then to her trembling hand, and finally kissed her fully, passionately, a kiss that carried promises of protection, devotion, and eternal loyalty. A vow sealed not in words, but in the quiet intensity of their shared heartbeat, the rhythm of a family reunited, unshakable and unstoppable. In that luminous, quiet moment beneath the hospital lights, he gazed down at their daughter, the tiny life that had survived against all odds, and whispered her name softly, reverently, a name heavy with meaning, a promise to the world and to themselves. Hope. Amara's eyes met his, glimmering with love, exhaustion, and the unspoken recognition that the trials they had endured, the betrayals, the lies, the fear, and the pain, had all led to this singular, perfect moment where their hearts, their lives, and their family were whole again. Armand held them both in a trembling embrace, feeling the perfect weight of his daughter in one arm and the steady, enduring warmth of Amara in the other, and he knew, with a clarity that cut through every shadow of doubt, that nothing, no enemy, no deceit, no tragedy, would ever be able to separate them again. He whispered into the quiet room, his lips brushing softly against Amara's ear, "We're complete. Finally, we're complete." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the world outside ceased to matter, leaving only the serene, unbreakable sanctuary of love, family, and the miracle they had fought so hard to protect. Outside the window, the city carried on unaware, but inside that room, under the warm glow of hospital lights, every breath, every heartbeat, every tear, every whispered word was a testament to survival, redemption, and the ultimate triumph of love. He watched as Amara gently touched their daughter's tiny fingers, her face glowing with awe and maternal pride, and he understood, in the deepest recesses of his soul, that they had been given not just life but purpose, not just survival but a future, and the dark shadows of the past no longer had any hold over them. Armand leaned down, kissing Amara again, this time with a soft, unhurried tenderness, letting the world slip away entirely, letting the love that had been tested, broken, and remade carry them forward. The baby cooed softly, the faintest sound a melody of innocence and promise, and Armand's tears of relief and joy fell freely as he murmured over her head, "Hope, you are our miracle, our forever, and we will never let anything touch you." Amara's lips curved into a faint, exhausted smile. the weariness of the past months melting into the warmth of present joy, and together, mother, father, and child formed a perfect triangle of love, unbroken, untouchable, and eternal. The beeping monitors, once instruments of tension, now pulsed gently in the background, a soothing rhythm accompanying the quiet symphony of their hearts, beating in unison, synchronized with the new life that had come into the world. And Arman, holding both his wife and daughter, knew that from this moment forward their family would never be fractured, never be shaken, never be divided again. In the soft, golden light of the hospital room, surrounded by whispers of hope, redemption, and a second chance, he pressed one final kiss to Amara's forehead, inhaling the scent of her, the essence of home, and whispered softly, with the kind of conviction that could move mountains, "We are forever, and nothing will ever take this from us." The room, once filled with chaos, fear, and uncertainty, now held only peace, love, and the quiet, profound certainty of a family made whole. And as Arman held his daughter close, feeling her tiny chest rise and fall, he understood with perfect clarity that the trials, the heartbreak, and the near losses had all led to this perfect, irreplaceable, unshakable moment, the miracle of love finally realized, unbroken, eternal, and true. Wow. What a journey this story has taken us on. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. I hope it touched your heart as much as it did mine. Remember, love, hope, and family are worth fighting for, no matter the obstacles. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and comment below what part of the story moved you the most. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that will touch your soul. Until next time, my family. Stay strong, stay loving, and keep believing in miracles.